How's it going, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and you are listening to another episode of Hoggin the Mic, our second episode since the beginning of fall camp. We'll bring Hutch in a moment. We will recap everything that we heard from Sam Pittman and an Arkansas spokesperson about what transpired at today's scrimmage. It is Thursday, August 15th, and Arkansas just wrapped up their second scrimmage of fall camp. And I think every Arkansas fan's outlook on this really is just going to come down to whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of person, because the defense won the day. So we'll discuss all that and everything else we've seen in camp, and maybe some remaining questions we have over the next 2 weeks before Arkansas opens up the season against UAPB. So let's bring Hutch in, play that rock music, and we'll get the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic on the roll. All right, Hutch, how's it going? Before we get started, as I mentioned in our intro, a lot of the scrimmage today is going to be dependent on whether you have a positive or negative outlook in life. So before we talk Arkansas, are you a glass half full or glass half empty guy typically in the grand scheme of the world?
I think in the grand scheme of the world, I would say glass half full. But having grown up in Springdale, Arkansas, going to Razorback games my whole life, being 30 years old, when it comes to the Razorbacks, generally glass half empty because that's kind of how things go in Razorback land.
I'm the opposite, I think. I'm a glass half empty guy overall, and since I've gotten here, I've tried to be a glass half full guy with the Razorbacks, but I don't know, potentially they're wearing me down because I have some negative things to say about what we heard about today's scrimmage. And let's dive in, Hutch. For a recap for those that maybe haven't read either of our stories or haven't really heard, the defense had a great day. They recorded 8 total interceptions and I believe 6 sacks. It sounds like Landon Jackson was kind of the star of the scrimmage because he had 3 of those sacks. And Coach Pittman did say that the defensive line, their pressure on the quarterbacks really played a part in the interceptions. There were some tipped passes too. It sounds like the wide receivers might have, whether those tipped passes were at the line of scrimmage or wide receivers not being able to catch the ball. A lot of factors contributed, but at the end of the day, it seems like the pass protection wasn't great. And overall, the offense kind of struggled today. Just how much are you reacting to this right now, Wes? Let's start on the offensive side of the ball because I think that's the biggest concern for everyone with the offensive line and everything. Based off what we heard from Pittman today, how concerned are you? Does today and what we heard change your level of concern entering the season?
I don't know if it really changes it because I've had a concern. I think I talked about it last week about, can Talon be accurate enough to be effective? We know, at least we think we know he's going to be really good with his legs, really fast, that kind of thing. And the accuracy's always been a little bit of a question. And Sam Pittman himself said was not as accurate as he has been. Now, I know some people maybe, really panicked when they heard 8 interceptions, but I think it's important to note that at least 4 of those interceptions were by the third team defense against the third team offense. So against guys like KJ Jackson or Blake Boda, or I don't know, maybe even Austin Ledbetter for all I know. But they were walk-on DBs. So again, not nearly as many, against Talon. We do know at least one of those other 4 were against Talon, and it was on a tipped pass that was probably more on the receiver than it was Talon. Don't know about the other 3. Who knows? Maybe they were all Talon. I don't know. A couple of them were by TJ Metcalf, who also had a really big day. But so I don't think it's necessarily more alarming than what I was previously. It's just more of, does he have the accuracy to put the ball in the right place? And especially when you throw in the fact that Andrew Armstrong and Tyrone Broden, neither one of those scrimmage. So factor in all that, I feel about the same as I did previously, which is kind of like, hey, let's wait and see what that accuracy looks like in real games.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I've said this maybe on this podcast, but I've written about it constantly. We're not going to see the full scope of Talon Green's powers or talent until he gets in a live setting and can run. Coach Pittman said today that Coach Petrino called maybe a little bit less quarterback runs today. I don't really understand how he would call many of those in a scrimmage before when Talon can't get hit. That just seems, a little counterproductive. But maybe it was more about rollouts, certain plays that, the quarterback has the opportunity to run, but, they're still passing plays primarily. Along all that aside, once Taylor can start using his legs, I think that's when we're going to see how good this guy can be. And, maybe there's a world where he doesn't throw that well this year, but he's so dynamic as an athlete. The running game is so good. The Bobby Petrino offensive scheme is so good that he doesn't have to be a elite or, even above average passer. If he can just be average in, the throwing department and be elite as a running quarterback, you can produce a successful offense that way for sure. I think what I'm concerned about coming out of the scrimmage today is just I was hoping that there would be more confidence in the offensive line, and it doesn't seem like that's developed quite yet. I think they're still optimistic and they think they're going to be better, and they just naturally have to be by bringing in 3 transfers and how poor they were last season. But you know, Eric Mateos told us when we talked to him, the Arkansas offensive line coach. He told us on Saturday Carmona's getting all the hype, and I tried to ask him a softball question so he could praise him, and he said, "I need him to block Landon Jackson better." And Landon Jackson's going to be an NFL draft pick, and the Arkansas defensive line is deep, but most SEC defensive lines are deep, and most SEC defensive lines have future NFL draft picks on the roster. So I'm really hoping, from what we see and what we hear from the coaches over the next couple weeks before that, there starts to be some building confidence in the offensive line. Because while I don't think that they will be as bad as last year, I think I was expecting them to be a little further along or to have more confidence in that unit right now than I currently do. And I'm a little worried that maybe that offensive line is not going to take the step that I anticipated in terms of their production compared to last year. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, and that's if the offensive line is constructed as we think it's going to be constructed. And, we still got the huge question mark about Patrick Kudus at left guard. He hasn't been out there since day 2 of fall camp. Got a back issue. It doesn't sound like they are, the U of A, but I personally am concerned there. Being an offensive lineman with a back issue, that's not a good combination. I think it's good that they figured out that maybe they could put Marion Harris in there as the guard. They had been rotating between Addison Nichols and Amari Wiggins between guard and center, and I wasn't 100% sold on Amari Wiggins, but I have a little bit more confidence in Marion Harris. So maybe that can solidify things. But if they have any other injuries, it could unravel and be just as bad as last year. I hate to say that, but I really think they're an injury or so away from it being not good. But yeah, there are reasons for it to be concerned, even if they all do stay healthy, because it does sound like the defensive line had a field day today, to be honest. So hopefully that's just Landon Jackson being a superstar, future NFL player. But it may also be a little bit cause for concern with Carmona and the rest of those guys up front.
Yeah, and you mentioned the potential of an injury, and I immediately came to mind. Oh, they can't lose Carmona, but I don't think they can lose Nichols either. They will be in trouble if they lose Blackstock. They're already having to replace one guard right now, so Lord knows if they have to replace 2 of them. It's where we've reached a point now where it feels like the 5 guys, and maybe that's a Marion, maybe that's Kudus, but it doesn't feel like they go deeper than 7, and that might even be a stretch. Like maybe there's 6 guys that they have confidence in, and that's troublesome. And I think that's in large part a product of just how poor they were last year. If last year's offensive line is good, maybe this is a huge hypothetical, but then Devin Manuel probably comes back. You get to kind of stick with Patrick Kudus outside, and maybe you feel better about developing who you already have in the program on the inside. But none of that happened. They had to completely rebuild the room, and it seems like while they were able to rebuild the top echelon of the room, that they're still struggling, providing that depth. And we'll see. I think we talked about this today when we left the Sam Pittman's press conference. Just last year, it was just constantly watching KJ Jefferson be under pressure, the running backs not have holes to work with. I have faith in Bobby Petrino and his scheme, but it can only do so much at the end of the day. Like the players have to perform up to their capabilities, and or have to maybe exceed those capabilities this season based off the recruits and the talent that they have compared to the rest of the SEC. Um, let's flip it though. The defense. I mean, if there's a world where this Arkansas defense is potentially a top five at worst, if upper half defense in the SEC, who are some guys you think, aside from Landon, the obvious name, and Jalen Braxton, some guys that you think the coaches are starting to really develop trust in? You've been impressed with in camp, some stock risers on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, I'm a big TJ Metcalf fan. I've liked him even since he committed, and even before today when he had 2 interceptions. And not only the 2 interceptions, but he also we heard from a UA spokesperson. He also had a really nice tackle of a running back short of the line to gain on a play. So it sounds like he's doing it against the run and the pass. Second year in the system, second year in college. He's got great bloodlines. I think he's a cousin of DK Metcalf, if I'm correct. I think his dad played maybe at Ole Miss as well, and so good bloodlines. I really think him, and even his brother, to be quite honest, as a true freshman. But TJ's a guy that I could totally see, playing a big role this year, and maybe he pushes Hudson Clark for that second starting safety spot. Sounds like Jaden Johnson's kind of locked in, but Sam Pittman said today that TJ's really pushing Hudson Clark, and I think that's something that a lot of fans will love to hear, because Hudson Clark has a bad rap amongst Arkansas fans, probably worse than it should be. But that just, I mean, if he can beat out Hudson Clark, it's not like he's beating out a scrub. He's beating out a solid player. I mean, that means he could be above average, and a guy that can develop as he's going to have to be back next year, assuming he doesn't hit the portal. Can't go pro, so. It'd be really nice to have a young guy like that step up. So I am personally buying stock in TJ Metcalf.
Yeah, and not only he'd be replacing a returning starter, and you just don't see that very often in college football. Hudson Clark's a guy that he could have left, whether that was to pursue professional opportunities in the NFL or elsewhere. He decided to return to Arkansas for one final season. Started almost. I think he started every game for them when he was healthy last year. I know he didn't play every single snap, but has been a consistent presence in this program. And if TJ Metcalf is able to beat him out at any point this season, that speaks highly of his progression and what the coaches think of him. And part of me thinks we've seen Hudson Clark, and the defense took immense strides last year, and Hudson played a part of that. But he's not the most athletic guy. He's had some struggles in the past, especially in the 2022 season when the pass defense was so bad. Maybe there's a higher ceiling for this team with a TJ Metcalf, but Hudson Clark's going to fight for that starting spot until the bitter end. He's not one to coast in and just give that up very easily. A stock riser for me, and I'm interested to hear what you think about this position group as a whole, is just the linebacker room. And it seems like they're going to try and find ways to get as many linebackers on the field as possible this year, which I don't think you could have said last year. I mean, they would have tried hard to keep it 2 linebackers at a time, whether that was Pooh and Jaheim, but they want to move Brad Spence down to as kind of an edge guy. I don't remember the buck. Excuse me, that's the name of the position. The buck position, where he's playing closer to the defensive line, and you have 3 linebackers. I mean, we've seen them practice with 4 linebackers on the field at times. It kind of depends who you consider a linebacker, because a lot of the guys they brought in from the portal, Larry Worth, Anthony Switzer, have positional versatility. It just feels like there's a lot of confidence in that position room right now. And the linebacker position, I think, has lost some importance overall. You're not seeing guys get drafted in the first round that are middle linebackers anymore, but still, at the end of the day in college football, it's a huge, critical piece of the defense. And if they've got guys that they trust to stop the run and defend the pass, it opens up a lot for this defense, especially with how good we think the defensive line could be.
Yeah, I mean, one reason the 21 team was so good, they had a really solid core of linebackers, and Bumper Pool, Hudson, Hayden Henry, Grant Morgan. I mean, that was a really talented group of linebackers. Maybe not the most athletically gifted or anything like that, but they were a really solid group and a reason for that team's success. This year's team, a group of linebackers, is much more athletic. I mean, Xavier Sori just jumps out at you, and you mentioned Brad Spence, a really gifted pass rusher. So you got a little bit of different pieces there. I mean, you mentioned Worth and Switzer, guys that can play nickel if they had to. It's a good looking group, and I mean, it was one of the biggest questions on the team entering fall camp for me. I think I even wrote that. And so to see or to hear Marcus Woodson earlier this week come out and say linebackers are deepest position on defense, that kind of took me back a little bit. I was like, oh my goodness, like that is a significant development. You also added Steven Dix out of the portal. Then the other young guys coming up, who knows, Carson Dean or Alex Sanford, Bradley Shaw is a true freshman. Maybe some of those guys can contribute as well. And suddenly you've got, instead of just a 3-man rotation at linebacker, maybe you've got 5 that you feel really confident in playing at that spot. That would give you a little bit more freedom to do some different things at linebacker, opposed to just sticking in your base defense.
They're high on Sorry, man. It seems like it's been a gradual process to get to that point where they've got confidence in him. It's not like he was, crazy building crazy hype in the spring, but he got better and better as the spring wore on. And then I think he had a pretty good spring game. And then he came back from the fall or he came back into the fall camp, and you started noticing him as a leader. We only get to see 15, 20 minutes of practice, but you started to notice, okay, he's the guy taking the first rep on the linebackers. He's the guy talking to them. And, he's still learning. There was a moment in fastball a couple days ago, I think, where Brad Spence had to shove him to the right side and make sure he was in the right position. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen on game day. There's communication issues among every college football team, even on Saturdays. But it seems like they're really high on Sorey and really high on Switzer. And of course, like you mentioned, Spence's ability to rush the passer and kind of do a little bit of everything. He's going to see the field. It's cool to see a position group that was a relative unknown and feel like they're building something there, and that confidence is kind of, maybe it spreads to the to the rest of the defense, where, hey, we didn't think we had this strong group of linebackers, and now that we do, and that can maybe unlock some things that we weren't able to do last year in a Travis Williams defense. And for the record, I don't want to, I'm not crapping on Pooh Paul and Jaheim Thomas. I thought those two guys played pretty well last year, but there was just not really any meaningful depth. And, towards the end of the season, it just kind of fell off for those two guys included. So we got what, Hutch? I think we've got about 11 practices left until game 1 against UAPB. What's your biggest question for this team? Whether that's, can a certain position group develop, a position battle still going on? What's, the biggest question you have before we get to UAPB?
I think a lot of them we've already discussed, whether it be the offensive line, how it's going to shake out if Kudus isn't healthy, or TJ Metcalf versus Hudson Clark. But I'll throw another one in there is the defensive line. It sounds like, obviously we know Landon Jackson is going to be one of your starting defensive ends. Nico DeVilliers has been the guy opposite of him pretty much since the spring, but it sounds like Anton Junkaj, after missing a week with a concussion, is back and really pushing for maybe that second starting spot. But they really like what they have in Nico and Anton. Quincy Rhodes is still coming along. We see, and one of the best things about practice is getting to see Deke Adams just absolutely get on those guys. And Quincy's been on the receiving end of some yelling, to say the least. And but I think it's because they know he's immensely talented, just really young, still raw. But I mean, that gives you a really solid 2-deep right there, like Sam Pittman said today. But I still have questions on the interior. It doesn't sound like they're totally super over the moon about Ian Jaffrard and Danny Saili from BYU. They like what they have, and their starting group has generally been Gregory and Ball. I think that's a really solid combo, but you need a lot of depth there. You got to have some rotation there. Kiwi Rose is back; he's solid. But then who's going to be that other guy? Who's going to be that other guy to rotate in? Is Danny Saili going to be a guy that can do that? Is it going to be Ian Jaffrard? Both of those guys as Sam Pittman have said, have some weight they've got to get off. That kind of it's getting late in the game to be getting weight off. I maybe have some questions and concerns there in the interior of that defensive line when it comes to maybe who that fourth defensive tackle is going to be.
Yeah, and again, this kind of goes back to the theme that we're talking about this entire roster, just the depth, the lack of depth. Because if the defensive tackles stay healthy all season, I think they're fine, right? Like Cam Ball, Eric Gregory, Kiwi Rose are the top three, and then by some combination of Danny Saili and Ian Jaffrard can be that fourth guy. That's what Pittman said today. Like neither of them are really ready to contribute in huge ways right now, but we can use both those players as one guy, and that's good enough. And that makes 100% sense. But if one guy goes down, then you can't use two guys for one. One of those guys has to step up and be a dude. So again, just the common theme of depth and how Arkansas survives if there are injuries this year. For me, my biggest question is who is going to be the second cornerback on this team? And Deron Wilson, Coach Marcus Woodson, the two guys that had lead the secondary, they've given us their cliche of we don't have starters, we have standards, which is fine. But at the end of the day, they're going to trot out two outside cornerbacks to start against Oklahoma State in Stillwater. And Jalen Braxton is going to be one of those guys. If he's not, that's a huge, huge red flag right off the bat. So Jalen Braxton will be one of those guys. Who is going to be the other guy? The candidates are, Jaheim Singletary and Keon Stewart, who both transferred into the program last year, have had much improved falls, a whole year in the program. And then Marquise Cuddy Robinson, who has missed a lot of time this fall, but he's been back the past few days and immediately started working with the starters. And then I'll throw a wild card in there, a guy I couldn't be higher on. I think I talk about him every day at practice. Hutch is smiling if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts now, because he knows I'm going to say Selman Bridges, the true freshman. He's every time I watch him, do a rep, I'm just impressed, whether he gets the pass breakup or he's, even if he gets beat sometimes, it's just impressive kind of watching his tall, athletic body glide over the field. And he's taking fall camp very seriously, which I know sounds basic, but he seems like a guy that wants to get on the field. He's, they've talked about the mentoring that Jalen Braxton is doing for him. And I don't know. I think he's got maybe one of the highest ceilings of anybody on that entire defense based on his body type, how much his talent could project to the next level. So do you have a favorite maybe of those guys who could start? I think I think Keon Stewart's probably the favorite, but it's not by much. I could see any of those four really being the starting cornerback this season opposite Braxton.
I think for Arkansas' sake, it would be really great if it could be Jaheim Singletary. I think he has the highest ceiling. This is a former 5-star recruit. He's got all the potential in the world. I was really impressed with him last fall. Then it obviously didn't go great. He really struggled against LSU, which I think you and I were talking about that the other day. Like, LSU had first-round draft picks at wide receiver, and they decided they were just going to pick on him, pick on the weakest link. And so it may be unfair to hold that against him. So I would say him. I've been very skeptical about Keon Stewart all along, but he has gotten a lot better. I will say that he has improved dramatically since last year. And then I still just don't know enough about Cuddy to really form an educated opinion about him. Like, he looks like he did well last year at South Alabama, which again was at South Alabama. They did beat Oklahoma State last year. He had an interception in that game, so maybe there's some sort of mental gymnastics Arkansas could play and have him start against Oklahoma State. I don't know, but I would not be surprised if any of those three end up starting early in the season. And then late in the season, as the season goes along, I mean, your guy Selman Bridges, I would not be surprised at all if he works his way, if not into a starting role, into a kind of a rotational role where he gets a few reps here and there. I don't see that a lot at the cornerback position, but depending on how the season goes, how they are at that point, maybe they start building for the future. Maybe we see him a little bit more later on as the season goes on.
And the secondary coaches have kind of said they want a little bit more rotation than we typically associate with that position. That could be just some fall camp buzz to keep everybody happy in the position room, and maybe when push comes to shove, they find two or three guys that are the top guys and getting most of the snaps. But it's going to be interesting. I think that entire secondary. It feels like Jaden Johnson and Jalen Braxton are locked in starters, and then the other three spots are not completely up for grabs, but there's you could see a variety of scenarios playing out. I mean, Danico Slaughter is a guy that he could play the hog. We've seen him working at safety, especially when they do go to that mint formation with just three linemen and three linebackers. Um, I don't know. It's going to be cool to see how this versatility with the roster translates to the regular season, and if they are able to translate that, or if at the end, at push, like I said, push comes to shove, they settle on something that they feel like, okay, this is our identity, the 4-2-5, enough of that mid formation, or if they do find multiple ways to get guys on the field and be very different with their scheme and throw a bunch of curveballs at the offense, I think that's probably where you see this defense find its best version of itself.
Yeah, I mean the versatility of everybody is just really really fascinating because they brought in, I mentioned Switzer and Worth. I mean those are two guys that could play linebacker or nickel. You've got Danico Slaughter who has played pretty much all three positions in the secondary over his career, mostly nickel and safety at Arkansas. You got Brad Spence who's a linebacker but can go down on the edge and rush the passer. I mean, that's even Nico DeVilliers. I mean, he's a guy that's a defensive end but plays that buck position. So they're going to ask him to, I guess, drop back in coverage maybe. I mean, that's going to be crazy to see, but I mean, he's a guy that can play that buck. So there's a lot of really versatile pieces on this roster. Does that translate to more success on defense? I don't know, but you'd like to think it'd give at least the opposing offensive coordinator more to think about on game days.
Absolutely. All right, real quick, I'll start this one and give you some time maybe to think. But we've already talked a good bit about the scrimmage today, but in the limited information that we are provided by an Arkansas spokesperson and Sam Pittman, did anything like in particular stand out to you when you look at those stats and key plays? For me, it was Braylon Russell again being, featured pretty heavily on key plays and big runs and everything like that. He had a 7-yard touchdown run. He had a 30-yard run and a 25-yard run. I don't know which defense he's going up against. I don't know which offense he's working with, but it seems like Braylon is going to be a factor this year in the offense in some form. I thought it was kind of interesting listening. We finally got to speak with Bobby Petrino earlier this week. I guess that was Tuesday. And he put Braylon Russell and Jaquindon Jackson kind of in the same bucket, and then separated the other three running backs into a different bucket. And I think that's interesting because Jaquindon has battled some injuries throughout his career. He's been held out of a couple practices this fall. He, only took part in a small amount of the scrimmage today. I think they know what they have with him, and they're trying to be careful with his body. But if he were to go down with an injury, I think Braylon Russell might be the guy that steps in and gets, a bulk of the carries just as kind of a bigger, more powerful back. And then R-Dub and Rodney Hill, Tyrell Reed are, I think R-Dub will get a good share of carries as well if Jaquindon Jackson does get hurt. But it might be more so like he's still the second option, the third down back, the receiving back, the kind of change of pace guy. And I think Braylon Russell could easily, one injury or just pure talent-wise, work his way into the rotation this year at running back.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I really like Braylon, and he's an in-state guy, so I always kind of root for those guys, so I hope he does well. A couple of things jumped out to me. The first one being that Jordan Anthony caught a 65-yard touchdown from Taylor Green, which means Jordan Anthony was working with the first unit. That's a little bit surprising. We haven't really seen him a lot with the first unit. He's got all the speed in the world because this is a guy that is a legitimate track, standout guy. I think he's placed, first or maybe second in the SEC, 60-meter dash or 60-yard dash, whatever it is, in indoor when he was at Kentucky. So he's got all the speed in the world, just very inconsistent when it comes to catching the ball. If he can get that locked down, then maybe they have something there. But another guy that's listed second in our bullets here is Isaac Taslaw. had a couple of 8-yard touchdown catches in the red zone. I think that's the key there. Like, I don't know if Isaac Tisla is going to be a huge, like, heavy targeted guy for Arkansas. He still has sometimes struggled, creating separation, getting off of DBs and stuff like that. But if you're in the red zone and the condensed area of the field, he has got incredible hands. He can make tremendous catches in tight coverage, and that's a great spot to use him. So if he could be a red zone threat, almost kind of like a tight end, is kind of how you almost view him, but he's not a tight end. That would be big. Just think of some offensive guys, and I will always give the special teams some love. It sounds like the kicker battle is over, despite Sam Pittman insisting that it is not.
No, 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 no. That's the direct quote from Sam Pittman today. I think it was 4 no's.
I think it
But
made it
maybe
8 no's, actually. It was a lot. He did not want us naming Matthew Shipley the starter, but I'm going to do it. Matthew Shipley is your starting kicker. Second straight scrimmage where he went 3 of 4, with one of those makes being a 50-plus yarder and a 2-minute drill, to win the game, as Sam Pittman likes to say. So, again, he's not going to be Cam Little, but I think he's going to be really solid and good, which is a much better and a big improvement from the spring when we were really concerned about that position because they were very inconsistent, and particularly in the stadium. So looks like they, at least Shipley has maybe figured that out and can be that guy for Arkansas.
Yeah, huge bonus if he's. I think I said this on our last pod. If he can be 75% from this on the season, I think that's great. I think they'd like him to get closer to 80%, but still, college kicker at 75%, make the occasional big one. Don't miss extra points. Be consistent inside of 40 yards, which I will say is one thing I am concerned with. It seems like he has, he will miss the occasional short field goal. It's not like he is, he's missing. It's not like when he misses kicks, it's from 50 longer than 40 yards. Like he made a 50-yarder today and his one miss was from 38. So that's definitely something to monitor. Probably, but I think the coaches staff feels pretty good about special teams overall. I mean, they keep raving about Devin Bale as a punter, and that's a good thing because I think when we took stock of this team after the first winter transfer portal, after Max Fletcher entered the transfer portal in April, we were all very concerned about special teams as a whole, and maybe that's died down a bit now. All right, Hutch, I think we can pretty much stop there. It's one thing I would like to say. We'll close here. Arkansas football last year 4-8. A lot of negative momentum within the program. A lot of I would say apathy toward the football program after the decision to retain Sam Pittman this year. Just from your sense of the fan base and everything, do you think that people are starting to buy the annual fall camp sunshine pumping buzz? And I don't mean that to be mean towards Arkansas. That's every football program in the country. Or are we still, do you think the fans have still kind of got last year in the forefront of their mind and they're not quite buying in just yet?
I think there's a larger percentage than normal who are skeptical, understandably so because of how last year went. I see it on social media all the time, on Twitter and Facebook comments and everything. I know that doesn't always tell you an accurate, kind of snapshot of the fan base, but every once in a while I'll see there's someone posting like, man, I think this team could surprise some people and win 9 games and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's people drinking the Kool-Aid for sure. But I also see very quickly the comments are like, are you crazy? This team isn't even going to win 4 games. So there's some more haters out there than normal when it's this close to the season. But I do see more and more optimistic posts as we inch closer to the opening game.
I agree, and I'm honestly a little surprised at I think that there's some excitement building, and I think a big part of that is probably Bobby Petrino. Because when we talk about the offense at any time and I bring up all of the things that I'm concerned about, you just look at me and you say, but they've got Bobby Petrino this year, which is 100% accurate. It's going to be a huge upgrade over Dan Enos and just the overall chemistry of Enos and the entire offense last year. At the same time, I still will have my concerns until I see the Bobby Petrino effect live in person. And we are closing in on that very day. It's so close. Can't wait for college football season, not only for Arkansas, but across the country. So thank you guys, everyone, for tuning in to Hoggin the Mic. We'll wrap up there. We'll have another episode coming out next week. And I'm sure, Hutch, we probably need to do a full-blown season preview at some point, make some predictions, not only about games on the schedule, but top performers and stuff like that. We'll try and get that out to y'all before the first game against UAPB. Thank you all so much again for listening. Please subscribe. Please read Hutch at bestofarkansassports.com and myself at swtimes.com. And get ready. Football season is here. So we'll talk to you guys soon.